Al Michaels, NBC Sports, joining us in the Dan Patrick Show. How are you, Al?
Dan, I'm fantastic. By the way, have you noticed that Comcast stock today is up 5%? Now, we know that GE sold the rest of its position, but I think it's basically due to the Dan Patrick Show ratings. So I thank you very much.
Thank
Since
you.
we're both owners of Comcast stock, it's a good day for all of us.
Well, I'm just trying to help you, Al.
Well, thank you, Dan.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that.
Are you playing golf today?
I will be playing golf today. Let me look outside here. Oh, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful SoCal day. A lot of the pros are in town, of course, for the L.A. Open, which is at Riviera, about a mile from where I live right now. And I think Mr. Jim Nance and I are going to be teeing it up for 9 at 2 o'clock, and that'll be my third 9 of the day. That's my day.
Right.
What's your day like?
I'm still recovering from shoulder surgery and probably going to have beer and wings with the Danettes.
You know what? That sounds pretty good. But you shoveled yourself out of your driveway, I hope, right?
You know what was bad? Is I did go out and try to shovel with my left hand, and I got busted at home. And,
Really?
yeah, not good, not smart, but I just had shoulder surgery on Friday, and I was out there trying to help. Yeah, I should have done that.
Dan, have you ever heard of the Yellow Pages? Let your fingers do the walking
I know.
and somebody else do the shoveling.
I know. Last time you shoveled your own snow.
Are you kidding me? Well, I grew up in Brooklyn, so I didn't have in an apartment building, and that's the last time I lived in the snow. But then again, I did live in Cincinnati when you were in Dayton in the early 70s, but we got out of there in the winter.
I was wondering about this, that much is made of what's going on with Fox and their soccer, and you have Gus Johnson, who's going to be calling soccer, but he had never called soccer. I immediately thought of you when, the Miracle on Ice, you hadn't called hockey before, I don't believe, leading up to the competition, had you?
Well, I think I told you the story at one point where I won that job because I was the one guy on the entire ABC sports staff, which included, of course, Howard Cosell, Jim McKay, Keith Jackson, Chris Schenkel, and some huge names. I had done one game, one. They had done a composite, none. So when it came around to who gets what, that's how I wind up with hockey. And not the biathlon.
One hockey game in your entire career leading up to calling the hockey in 1980.
Plus, remember, though, as a kid growing up in Brooklyn, my father was a gigantic sports fan, so, of course, in the summertime, we would walk to Ebbets Field, and in the wintertime, he would take me to Madison Square Garden. And I remember as a child, the Rangers played Wednesday nights and Sunday nights. So the school the next day, I couldn't go to those games. But the New York Rovers of the Eastern Hockey League played on Saturday afternoons, and that was my entree to hockey. And then I go all the way back to, when I got a little bit older and I was able to go to the Ranger games at night with, Gump Worsley and all the rest. So the other thing, too, Dan, is going to those Olympics, I was the only guy on that staff who can actually explain offside and icing. And I love hockey to this day.
Oh, man. But understanding the terminology, the jargon, is probably half the battle, I would think, isn't it?
It's part of it. But remember, this is in 1980. You would do the game much differently then because you didn't see very much hockey on national television. So it's kind of, it's like giving the viewer a primer. And you had to go back and explain certain things very simplistically. I mean, you'd be insulting the intelligence of most of the audience if you did it today because we've just come a long way. But in those years, it was basically who's who, how do the rules work, what's going on, and, of course, what happened in Lake Placid really stood for itself, just the drama of the moment and what took place. So, to me, obviously, it's something that I look back upon as the greatest thing I've ever had a chance to be a part of, but it all had to do with what those guys did on the ice. I mean, I was there for the ride.
He's Al Michaels, NBC Sports, joining us, Dan Patrick Show. But understanding brevity and how that, silence or natural sound. And I've said, if you're doing radio, it's unbelievable weapon or tool to have. With TV, sometimes you do it because we get to see the pictures, and anything you say is probably going to interfere, not necessarily compliment. But to say, do you believe in miracles? Yes. And to do it in the moment, say it, get the hell out of the way and let the emotion just kind of, wash us over. I mean, it's truly remarkable to do that. People don't do that now.
I guess they don't. A lot of luck is involved in what happened there. And, everybody through the years, when I get interviewed for that story and they want to talk about it again, and we're coming up on another anniversary here pretty shortly, what was in your mind? How did you come up with it? Did you think about it beforehand? And all it was, Dan, was a case of, in those years, nobody had a home VCR. So I'm not thinking about, I have to do something for posterity. Topped off by, I didn't think the United States had a chance in 1,000 to win that game, as Ken Dryden and I were walking over to the arena that day. So looking back now, where did it come from? It came from my heart. Not my brain. That was my heart speaking at the end of the game. And then I knew, I'd been a sports fan since, as I say, my father takes me to games when I'm 6 years old, so I kind of understood the fans' mentality. Even though I was a broadcaster, I got what fans were thinking and what they wanted to hear and what they didn't want to hear. And what was there to say at that point? It's television. Even on radio, I wouldn't have said anything. The crowd took over. Let him go. Why would you want to fight the crowd? You don't want to fight the crowd. To me, that's one of the cardinal rules of broadcasting.
We've been talking about Michael Jordan and LeBron James with Michael at age 50 now. Sports Illustrated has a cover story about Michael, the comparisons with LeBron James. You didn't call Michael Jordan games when you were doing the NBA. He'd been out of the league. But do you remember meeting him, competing with him in anything?
Great story for you. Hey, by the way, I know you're talking about James and you're talking about Michael. I'm living out here. Kobe is in that conversation. There's no question. And don't forget Elgin Baylor. I know I sound like a dinosaur, but I remember listening to Chick Hearn describe Elgin Baylor scoring 71 points in the game at Madison Square Garden back in 1960. I think Jerry West might have been second on the team in scoring that night with 10. Anyway, I digress. The first time I met Michael Jordan, I'm on the beach in Maui on vacation, summer of '98. Michael had just retired from the Bulls. And, Michael loves to play golf. So I see him on the beach, and, hey, how are you, the whole thing. And he was great. He's a big sports fan. And so he then calls me to the hotel, and he says, you want to play golf with us tomorrow? I said, of course. So we go out to the Wailea course on Maui. And, the thing with Michael is there are no back tees. Michael makes his own tees. Michael is like teeing off from Kauai. He can't get far enough back. So, and one of the guys in our foursome was Joe Morgan, the baseball Joe, who, when I'm doing the Cincinnati Reds, Joe and I go all the way back to when Joe was with the Reds and I'm announcing the Reds. So, of course, Joe's been a long-time friend. So we're playing with Michael, and he was just phenomenal. And I think he shot about even par that day, and hit a 210-yard sand shot like 3 feet from the hole. And, he really had his game on that day, and I knew how much he loved the game. But here's what I will never forget, Dan. So we go to get a drink after we play, and we're in the clubhouse. This is '98, and this is when Mark McGuire and Sammy Sosa are chasing Maris, and everybody's talking about that. So we're sitting there in the bar, and there's a television above the bar, which is maybe 40 feet away, and maybe it's a 40-inch screen, but it's a ways from us. And we're sitting there, we're talking about McGuire and Sosa, and the mothership is on, and SportsCenter is on. And up pops, since we're in Hawaii, the games have already been played on the East Coast, and the panels pop up. You know the way they did them with the box score on the left and all of the other information on the right. And Morgan and I are looking up there, and we're going, well, they're talking about McGuire and Sosa, and we can't read anything. And Michael looks up, and I'll never forget, he goes, well, Sosa was 2 for 5, got a home run, 3 RBIs. He's reading the small print. And Morgan and I looked at each other, and when we walked out in the parking lot, we went, nobody has eyes like this guy. And I started to think, do you realize what the rim must have looked like to Michael Jordan? We're straining to see colors on the television set, and Michael was reading the agatype from 40 feet away.
How competitive was he on the golf course?
Well, he had his own. There was a pro there, so Morgan. We chose up sides, and I can't remember who was who, but we had a small game of 2 against 2. But he had a huge game for a lot of money with the pro, so he was extremely competitive. But the thing was too, he loved it. He was great company. The cigar was going the whole time, and it was a very memorable and exciting day for me.
I've often said people should do a story, and I tried to do this at the mothership, on eyesight with greatness. because I think there's a direct correlation between those who have great eyesight and those who don't, those who correct their eyesight and how it helps them. But, Ted Williams was supposed to have, like 20/10 vision.
Right.
To be able to have that is such a great advantage no matter what sport you're playing. So for you to say that about Jordan, I'd never heard anything about his eyesight.
Right.
But I do think that plays a large role, and certainly in baseball.
Sure.
These skills where you have to be able to see, and how well do you see?
No question, because baseball players will say they can see the seams. How are they rotating? Pete Rose used to tell me, in those years in Cincinnati, he could tell what kind of a pitcher was by the way the seams were rotating. So Pete had fantastic eyesight. But again, with Jordan, to think about this, what did that rim look like? Was it in 5D? I mean, think about that. And, it's a gigantic advantage.
When you were there with the Reds, and I always wondered this, and I grew up a big Pete Rose fan, but his best friend was a guy who trafficked steroids.
Yeah.
Do you think Pete ever did steroids when he played?
I don't think so. And again, I was around there for 3 years. I didn't know what was what. I know that there were, during those years in baseball, you heard about a lot of amphetamines, dexedrine and benzedrine, and I guess it wasn't even illegal then to keep you going through the season. I guess there was some of that. I just was never into what was taking place. Nobody really talked about it. But Pete was wired anyway. Pete, I never thought that Pete needed anything.
Well, I could see him taking amphetamines.
Yeah, because he's just, that's Pete. And Pete was around the clock working on baseball, taking batting practice, early in the morning in spring training, and and being out there all day long, and even taking batting practice after the game, never stopping. So that's conceivable. But again, I have no firsthand knowledge. We look back now and go, well, we missed a lot of stuff, but I can't tell you for certain what specifically I missed in that particular case.
Before I let you go, the Super Bowl Saturday. As I'm looking at contingency plans, this whole outdoor Super Bowl in New York City.
Yep.
What kind of idea do you think it is?
I like it. I think it's great. Football, look, why can you play the NFC or AFC championship game in a blizzard, but you can't play the Super Bowl? I like it. I think it lends an air of mystery to it. I mean, really, Dan, when you think about it, what if you had a monsoon in Miami during the Super Bowl? Miami's a great place to have it in terms of weather, or Tampa. Is that going to stop a monsoon from coming in? Look, I live in California, where they played a number of Super Bowls, and, God willing, someday back in Los Angeles in a stadium, but they played 3 in San Diego, and they've been blessed by good weather. But I've been out here in late January, early February, where it pours for 5 days. So what? So if you have some snow in New York, so what? It's football. I'm looking forward to it.
I also saw where they're taking wrestling out of the Olympics.
They are. I saw that yesterday, too. I don't understand that. So I guess it got down to wrestling and modern pentathlon and modern pentathlon 1.
Yeah, but look, it's all shady with some of these guys who are running the Olympics and on certain boards. And I think that, the head of the IOC is on the modern pentathlon board.
Right.
I mean, come on here. Wrestling, to me, that should be in the Olympic Games.
Well, especially if you can bring, like, Gorgeous George back. That would be terrific. but yeah, look, you and I both know, having had Olympic experience, we don't know what goes on in Lausanne. I have no, the irony was, when I was at the ABC for those many years and doing Wide World of Sports, I once did the World Wrestling Championships from Lausanne, the head of the headquarters of the IOC, and now they dump it. But I guess that's for 2020, and they can reapply. And look, what is it? They're thinking about something called, I saw wakeboarding is up for wakeboarding. What is it? Waterboarding?
No.
What is that?
No.
What are we talking about?
Okay, should I have synchronized swimming and rhythmic gymnastics all in the same Olympics? I mean, that's too much to ask, Al.
Not really. I mean, I can see it like a rhythmic gymnastics league, can't you? They play like
a fantasy league.
They play right. They play like 80 games around the country, Madison Square Garden, Staples Center, and all of the rest.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Dan, maybe it's just that you and I have been around too long right now. This is where the world is going. Rhythmic gymnastics, modern pentathlon, wakeboarding.
Yeah.
Oh,
and no
baby.
wrestling.
And Elgin Baylor is a dinosaur. You got to get Baylor into this conversation. I'm telling you.
But you put Kobe in the conversation with Michael, or if he wins his sixth, okay, doesn't have to win his sixth.
No, No, I mean 5 is pretty damn good. And Kobe's he's fantastic.
But he's not better than Jordan.
I don't know.
Okay, all right.
I mean,
that's fair.
Here's the thing: we're arguing about eras and all of this, and you're really splitting hairs here. Look, as great as LeBron is, maybe LeBron's the greatest physical talent. I don't know, but it's a good thing to argue about. But you know that the questions are unanswerable. I mean, you can sit there till you're blue in the face and say this guy is better than this guy. Nobody will ever know. Remember when the Sports Century wanted the panel to select the greatest athlete of the 20th century? Jim Thorpe had zero chance.
Yeah.
Zero. They didn't know who he was.
Yep.
There was no television. There was no radio. Nobody knew what Jim Thorpe did. He was out of the equation. So like Elgin Baylor from 50 years ago or 60 years ago, whenever it was, he's out of the equation. But I remember I'm old enough, and when I was a kid and I came out here and the Lakers came to Los Angeles, watching Elgin Baylor, it was phenomenal. This was Jordan before Jordan. Did Michael take it to the next level? Probably. But when you compared Baylor to the guys he was playing against, oh, my God, what a treat.
Tell Jerry West I said hello, Al.
I will. I'll see Jerry in the next couple of days for certain.
Yeah, tell him I said hello.
I will.
Good to visit with you again.
All right, Dan, take care,
Thank you, buddy. That's Al Michaels, NBC Sports.